The real bicameral mind. How ancient humans actually heard the voices of gods. What if I told you that ancient humans literally heard the voices of gods? And we can now explain exactly how this happened using modern neuroscience. Forget everything you think you know about consciousness. For thousands of years, humans operated with fundamentally different brainwaves. And when their right hemisphere suddenly spiked into gamma mode, they experienced it as divine beings giving them direct commands. This isn't mythology. This is the most scientifically plausible explanation for the bicameral mind ever proposed. The gods were real. They were gamma waves. Smash that subscribe button, because this is going to flip everything you know about human consciousness and ancient civilizations. Julian Jaynes proposed that ancient humans had bicameral minds, two separate mental entities in one brain. But here's the breakthrough. Instead of imagining impossible neurological splits, what if both hemispheres normally operated in the same slow, meditative brain waves, delta, theta, and alpha, creating a dreamy, intuitive baseline consciousness, completely unlike our modern analytical minds? But then, occasionally, the right hemisphere would suddenly flash into gamma waves, the fastest brainwaves possible, creating lightning-fast insights that the left hemisphere would experience as the voice of a god. Picture ancient humans living in a completely different mental reality. The dreamy baseline, both hemispheres flowing in delta deep wisdom, theta visionary states, and alpha effortless awareness. This wasn't primitive. It was a fundamentally different way of having mental experiences. Less analytical, more intuitive. Less individual, more collectively synchronized. Less problem-solving, more pattern-following. Less questioning, more accepting of natural flow. Ancient humans lived in what we might call a permanent meditative state, deeply connected to nature, community, and cosmic rhythms, but without the sharp individual self-awareness that defines modern consciousness. The collective mind. When everyone operates in these slow, synchronized brainwaves, you get something remarkable. Genuine collective consciousness. Ancient societies could coordinate massive projects not through complex planning, but through intuitive synchronization. They were like flocks of birds moving as one mind. But then something extraordinary would happen. The divine spike, suddenly, without warning. The right hemisphere would spike into gamma waves, 40, 60, 80 hertz, creating an explosion of rapid-fire pattern recognition, insight binding, and complex processing that was completely alien to their normal consciousness. The God experience. From the left hemisphere's perspective, still flowing in slow delta theta alpha waves, this gamma spike would feel like a completely external intelligence suddenly speaking. Divine wisdom being downloaded at impossible speed. Commands arriving with absolute authority and clarity. Direct communication from a higher power. The neurological reality, the gamma spike, was their own brain. But because it was so radically different from their baseline mental experience, it felt completely other. Imagine if right now, part of your brain suddenly started operating 10 times faster than normal. You'd experience it as something foreign speaking to you. This explains everything about ancient civilizations, why statues had such power. Ancient kings didn't just rule. They literally heard gods telling them what to do through gamma flashes. The elaborate statues weren't art. They were focusing devices. When the king looked at the statue of his god, it would trigger the right conditions for gamma spikes, and he'd receive direct divine commands. The perfect social order. No complex laws or democratic debates needed. When problems arose, leaders would wait for gamma flashes, divine commands that would provide clear, authoritative solutions. Society ran on direct divine guidance, not human reasoning. The bicameral architecture, those massive temples and pyramids, they were designed to trigger and amplify gamma spike experiences. The acoustics, the visual design, the ritual spaces, all engineered to create the neurological conditions where gods would speak. Why they seemed fearless. Ancient humans could undertake massive, seemingly impossible projects because they weren't relying on human planning. They were following divine commands, received through gamma consciousness spikes. But then everything changed. The silence of the gods, around 1200 to 800 BCE. The gamma spikes stopped working reliably. Climate change, social upheaval, and population pressures created too much stress for the delicate neurological conditions needed for bicameral consciousness. The birth of anxiety. For the first time in human history, people had to make decisions without divine guidance. The left hemisphere, previously just a passive receiver of God commands, suddenly had to figure out what to do on its own. This was the birth of individual consciousness and individual anxiety. The desperate search. This is why we see an explosion of divination, oracles, and religious practices around this time. Humans were desperately trying to recreate the gamma spike god experiences they'd lost. The oracle at Delphi, the I Ching, temple rituals, all attempts to artificially trigger what had once happened. Naturally, here's what this means for us today. We traded gods for anxiety. Modern consciousness, with its bilateral gamma and beta waves, gave us individual thinking, creativity, and problem-solving. But we lost the ability to hear divine guidance and experience collective consciousness. The neuroscience checks out. This model explains why. Meditation and psychedelics can trigger divine experiences. They recreate ancient brainwave states. Religious practices often involve repetitive, trance-inducing activities, attempting to trigger gamma spikes. Mystics throughout history describe sudden downloads of divine knowledge, gamma flashes, breaking through modern consciousness. Could we get it back? Some researchers think we could potentially recreate bicameral states through advanced neurofeedback training, targeted electromagnetic stimulation, specific meditation practices that quiet the left hemisphere while priming the right for gamma spikes. The integration possibility. Maybe the future isn't choosing between ancient God consciousness and modern self-awareness. Maybe it's learning to access both. Here's the profound realization. The gods weren't mythology. They were neurology. For thousands of years, humans lived in direct communication with divine intelligence, not because supernatural beings were speaking to them, but because their brains were organized completely differently. When their right hemisphere would spike into gamma consciousness, it generated insights so rapid and profound that it felt like receiving wisdom from higher beings. We didn't lose our gods because they abandoned us. We lost them because our consciousness evolved beyond the neurological states that made divine communication possible. But here's the hope. If bicameral consciousness was just a different pattern of brainwaves, then maybe it's not lost forever. Maybe the next stage of human evolution isn't choosing between ancient divine guidance and modern individual thinking. Maybe it's becoming beings who can access both. The gods aren't dead. They're just waiting for us to remember how to tune our brains to the right frequency. So here's my question for you. If you could temporarily experience bicameral consciousness, hearing divine guidance through gamma spike experiences, would you want to? And what do you think we gained and lost when we traded God consciousness for self-consciousness? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had experiences that felt like receiving divine downloads or external guidance. And what do you think? Are we more evolved than ancient humans, or did we lose something precious? If this scientific explanation of divine consciousness blew your mind, subscribe for more explorations into the hidden neuroscience of human experience. And remember, every time you have a sudden flash of insight or inspiration, ask yourself, could this be what the ancients experienced as the voice of gods? You might be closer to bicameralism than you think.